So, welcome back. As I was saying, our first story of the day has to do with the war in Ukraine. So, what has been happening there? Well, over the past week, the US, unlike their other allies, people like countries like the United Kingdom, Germany, and France, they have actually decided to send cluster bombs. Okay, so our first question, therefore, is to find out what are cluster bombs, what is the impact of the delivery of the cluster bomb will be on the war, and we're going to continue to ask the question of the moral high ground. What does that actually mean for the West, who are seeking who at least are presenting themselves in a way that where they pretend that they have some kind of more moral high ground. So we're going to find out all of that on today's show. So let's first find out what are cluster bombs. Okay, why were they banned, and why is the US trying or sending them to Ukraine at the moment? So without further ado, let's read this article by the BBC and I will react to it. Okay, um, so the US has announced it's complying with a Ukrainian request to supply it with controversial cluster munitions. The move has been criticized by human rights groups as the weapon is banned by more than 100 countries. Okay, cluster munitions are a method of dispersing large number of tiny bomblets from a rocket, missile, or artillery shell that scatters them in mid-flight over a wide area. They are intended to explode on impact, but a significant portion of DADs, meaning they don't explode initially. This happens especially if they land on wet or soft ground. Okay, they can then explode at a later date on being picked up or trodden on, killing or maiming the victim. From a military perspective, they can be horribly effective when used against dagging ground troops in trenches and fortified positions, rendering large areas too dangerous to move around in until carefully cleared. Okay, so they showed you here what they look like. So munition is fired from the ground or air. The bomblets are released. The bomblets fall on the ground. Not all detonate immediately. Now, in some cases, what they don't actually tell you, so they pretend that what they call the dead rate is very low, but in reality, the dead rate can be as much as 30% in some cases, because as you have read there, they don't all explode and they can cause serious damage to the person who later on may step on it, may pick it up, and then poof, the thing explode in the face, which will cause severe injuries and death. And coming myself from a country where some of those things, like mines, were used, I can tell you that those are really, really, really bad. Okay, so why are they banned? So more than 100 countries, including the UK, France, and Germany, have signed an international treaty, the Convention on Cluster Munitions, that outlaws the use or stockpiling of these weapons due to their indiscriminate effect on civilian population. So children are particularly prone to injury as the bomblet can resemble a small toy left in a residential or farmland area and are often picked up out of curiosity. So human rights groups have described cluster munition as abhorrent and even a war crime. Now, who still uses them? Both Russia and Ukraine have been using cluster munition since the start of the Russian full-scale invasion in February 2022. So remember, so this is the country that you're meant to support wholeheartedly. Okay? But they're using it anyways. So neither have signed the treaty banning them. nor has the US, but it has previously criticized Russia's extensive use of the weapon. Russia cluster munition reportedly have a dead rate of 40%, meaning large number remain a hazard on the ground, whereas the average dead rate is believed to be 20%. So the Pentagon estimates its own cluster bomblets have a dead rate of less than 3%. So how can we actually verify that? We don't. And this is the problem. So much longer, probably after the war has ended, these things will still be lying around, causing the death of kids. And they have no qualm, no questions that they can ask themselves, and that so that they can at least refrain themselves from using such weapons on openly. Okay, so these people who claim that they have a moral authority, these people who go around telling you that they will defend Ukraine to the end, they have no interest in actually doing the right thing, because the kids who are going to get killed by this are primarily civilians, and they're primarily their own people. How can a government use such weapons on their own land against their own people? This is just insane. So, as you have read there for yourselves, so let's carry on. So, why is Ukraine asking for them? So, once again, this is from the BBC. But we're going to see exactly what it means. So Ukraine forces are running desperately low on artillery shells, largely because, like the Russian, they use them up as extraordinarily high rates, and Ukraine Western allies cannot replace them at the speed they are needed. In the largely static, grinding battlefront of southern and eastern Ukraine, artillery has become a key weapon. The Ukrainians now face a daunting task in trying to dislodge the invading Russians from the well-dug-in defensive position stretched along a 1,000-kilometer battlefront. In the absence of enough artillery shell, Ukraine has asked the US to restock its supply of cluster munition to target the Russian infantry manning all those defensive trenches. Some experts say that by using cluster bombs to suppress enemy fire from the trenches, Ukrainian forces could gain precious time to help them clear the way through Russian minefields. But others say that there is no need for them, arguing the different type of conventional weapon could do the job just as well. This has not been an easy decision for Washington and is deeply unpopular with many Democrats and human rights advocates. The debate has been going on for at least 6 months. Okay, so the decision effect will be knocked away on the moral ground Washington sits on this war. I would argue that you don't have an actual moral high ground. It is insane to pretend that you do have a moral high ground. You don't. You are the people who have for a very long time supported this war. If you have any moral high ground, you will make peace with the Russians before this nonsense even happened in the first place. Not during, but before it happened, because you knew it would get there and you did nothing because you wanted to benefit from this nonsense. Okay, that is just very simple. So Russia's numerous alleged war crimes are well documented, but this move is likely to draw accusation of US hypocrisy. Number one, you've always been hypocrites. Okay, these people have always been hypocrites. How many wars have been started by these people? Right, so to prove the point, they knew, and when I say that Russia had done initially everything in its power to negotiate in good faith with these countries, this country had no use, and they didn't want to actually make peace with Russia. They never did. Okay, so let's hear here. So this dates back to last year in December. I don't know how many of you know that, but there was this peace talk before. So that was in 2014. So round about the time when those republic in the east wanted broke away from Ukraine, because again, and I've mentioned it before, the Ukrainian government, because of the shift, this hyper nationalistic shift in the politics, they absolutely wanted to suppress anyone who doesn't speak Ukrainian, or they even try to suppress Russian to be spoken in administrative capacity. So once again, Ukraine has at least 30 to 36% of its own citizens who are Russian speaking. I did not see anyone in the West talking about these people as their own government stripped them of a key of their own language, of the church, and so on and so forth. Nobody in the West, I don't remember anybody in the media saying, well, perhaps this is a bad thing. I don't remember that. While they were shelling their own people, while they were killing their own citizen. This is insane. So no, you don't have a moral high ground. Do not talk to me about a moral high ground when it comes
to the decision on cluster munitions. Number one, look, I understand the rationale. It's been explained. You've painstakingly explained, and I know this is not a unanimous decision in NATO. But have we not lost our moral authority on something like this as a leader on this stuff when it comes to, look, we just got rid of our chemical weapons, and we've been trying to lead the world in getting rid of that, and we try to rhetorically lead the world in trying to get rid of these barbaric weapons, and then here we are now still going into our stockpile and giving them to an ally. Does that not harm our moral authority?
Well, Chuck, our moral authority has not derived from being a signatory to the Convention Against Cluster Munitions. We have not been at any point since that convention came into effect. Neither has Ukraine. Our moral authority and Ukraine's moral authority in this conflict comes from the fact that we are supporting a country under a brutal, vicious attack by its neighbor, with missiles and bombs raining down on its cities, killing its civilians, destroying its schools, its churches, its hospitals. And the idea that providing Ukraine with a weapon in order for them to be able to defend their homeland, protect their civilians, is somehow a challenge to our moral authority, I find questionable. I would say that we are stepping up to give Ukraine what it needs in order to not be defenseless in the face of a Russian onslaught. We are simply not going to leave Ukraine defenseless. The president was determined on that point, and we've remained.
So you heard it for yourself, guys. As I said to you, these people, this whole war, for starters, is a farce, because these people do not, I repeat, do not have any moral high ground. What they want is to slaughter as many Ukrainians. They will sacrifice as many Ukrainians as possible into this war. But the reality is, they know. They knew it before before Ukraine lost Bakhmut. They knew that there was just no way that Ukraine will win this on the battlefield. So John Mersheimer, when he does, I have mentioned him before, when he does explain, and I really hope that you guys will go on and watch this show, his talk, when he does cover these topics, and when he explains to people that there is simply no way for this conflict to end in a good way for either Russia or even Ukraine and the West. So which means the battlegrounds are going to be frozen where they are. The people who wanted to go towards Russia, who have voted, once again, the will of the people, they voted themselves not to be attached to Ukraine anymore, because they don't recognize the government that has killed them, that has been killing them for years now, when the West has been silenced for 9 long years. And they've said no more. No more of this stuff, and so they voted themselves to join to join Russia. By the way, what has been happening in Ukraine is a disaster, and it could all be avoided if all the people who are involved there had said, well, we shouldn't want, because again, for many people, Barack Obama in 2014 said himself that the US had no strategic interest in Ukraine. They didn't have any strategic interest in Ukraine. And then yet they found themselves there again, sacrificing as many Ukrainians as possible. This is insane, guys. So, in my opinion, these people do not have any moral high ground to talk about. And I have stated it before. The Russians are never going to accept that, because they have lived through it. Two of these armies. I'm just going to show you guys very quickly before I end this segment. On June 24, 1820, Napoleon Bonaparte and his Grande Armée crossed the Nam River, beginning what was soon to be a fateful, if not cataclysmic, invasion of Russia. Almost 129 years later, to the day, Germany began its own campaign into the motherland, finding, like so many others before it, that the road to Moscow was and almost always is paved with frostbite, starvation, and skulls. Okay, both sides fought with a demonic fury, according to the National World War II Museum, that resulted in the death of over 2 million German soldiers and over 24 million Soviet soldiers and civilians. Guys, for those people who do not know, Russia is never going to, after everything that they've spent defending Ukraine, because those who do not know, do not understand how much you've just read there, 24 million people were dead trying to defend their homeland. They will never cease that. They will never do it. So, which means that the West knows that exactly, and yet they persist in that way. So, which means to me that they want to sacrifice as many people as possible. And for them, human life is nothing. So, in my book, they do not have any moral high ground when it comes to this issue. They do not have one. Russia defeated Napoleon Bonaparte in 1812. They defeated once again the German tanks who just crossed the border and wanted to invade Russia back in 1941, in June of 1941. And now German tanks again find themselves attacking Russia through Ukraine. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So, but that is it for me for this segment. So then we will look at the situation of what is happening in Georgia with the BLM mayor who was arrested over the past week and released on 11,000 bond. So stick with me, and we will look at that story next.